You see, when we talk about this idea of rest, is that I want you to know that God desires rest for you to see life for what it is. For those of you that are list makers, how many of you ever made a list and then never made another one? You ever done that? Right? Once you make a list and you accomplish the list, is there usually another list after that? Is that right? Okay. Some of you that only get that 2 hours of sleep at night, and I think when you talk about this, it might mean because you're worried about the list, right? You're worried about the next list. And the reality is the things on the list I'm growing to understand is that they're not just there tomorrow, they're the day after, the week after, the month after, and the year after. And guess what? The list stays there. There's always going to be a new list. And see, when we have life that is happening before us, sometimes we mix up and we mess up and don't realize what life is meant to be about. The Pharisees missed it on that day. They began living their life, and especially in rest, and the ideas of do's and don'ts. Is that they said, this is what you should do and this is what you should not do. In other words, they made man's law out of resting with God. And when we try to do man's law, guess what happens? The don'ts of today become the do's of tomorrow. Did you know that? The do's of today become the don'ts of tomorrow. I was told that some people that grew up in church, right, is that guys weren't supposed to have long hair. Did you know that? Like that was somewhere in the Bible, I think is what they said. And somewhere along the way that they had, their guy shared with me that there was a Bible college that he went to, and back in the 50s that the women were not allowed to wear polka dot dresses. You know why they weren't allowed to wear polka dot dresses? They were afraid the boys would be tempted to poke the dots. True story. Right? See, we've jumped through the hoops of do's and don'ts in man's law. I want you to know in man's rules is that you will never accomplish that. We don't rest so that we're good with God. We don't rest because man tells us to. We rest because God rested. We rest because God said it's good for us. You see, if we keep jumping through the hoops that God has said, or that man states, it can become almost nauseating. This last week, as we were driving here in North Topeka, I saw the carnival. It's up here. It's set up, right? I have to tell you, there's something about those carnivals that excite me, but also fear me. I get fearful of all the same deal, right? I don't know who checks those things, but like, you're 20 feet in the air, spinning around at 40 miles an hour. Someone's going to skip on the concrete. Like, that's what I envision. But growing up, we had a carnival very similar. It was called Sturgis Falls Days. And Sturgis Falls Days is a week-long town event, and like there was the side that we could go hang out as kids, and the other side we were told don't go over there. That's where those people go, right? Like that's where the party was happening. We're going to the rides, okay? And so we would go to the rides, and I remember in 4th grade, my friend Paul was over, and we had shoved some like loose meat sandwiches into our mouth, and it was time to go to the carnival. And we walk up to the carnival, and if you've ever been at the carnival, you know the rides that everyone's attracted to is the one that had the most bling, right? The most lights, the things that are the fastest, where the line tends to be the longest. And we walk up, and there was this ride, it was called the Gravitron, right? What the Gravitron looked like was a spaceship, like a flying saucer, and it just spun around. There was lights all over it. I don't know what was happening inside the Gravitron because the door was closed, right? But it spun fast. And my buddy Paul walking up says, I think we should go on that. And I was terrified, right? I thought to myself, the goal of every ride when you go to the carnival is just get to the end and not what? Vomit. Like that's the goal. And I saw that ride as something that I was not going to accomplish that task, right? But I could, as an 8-year-old boy starting to grow and become a young man, I didn't want to let him know that I was scared to go on the Gravitron. So the time came, we hand out the tickets, and we lobby for what's ride to get on, and we get in there, and we walk inside the Gravitron, and it was this round circular thing, and there was pads along the side, right? And you stood by this pad, and as the thing began to spin, you then stuck against the wall, and you slid up to the top, right? Well, what was very cool about the Gravitron is when you're inside, you could see all the people around you. It didn't really look like anyone was moving because you're spinning on the inside, but the whole thing's spinning around you. My stomach wasn't feeling the best, but I'm holding on the best that I can, right? Because we're in there with my friend, and this is what you're supposed to do. But we look across, and there was a lady, I remember right across from me, that apparently had been bugged into, or I don't know how she got put in there by her kid, but her face spoke green all the way across it, right? And as it began to spin and spin more, her stomach began speaking to her face, right? Or her face began speaking to her stomach. And all of a sudden, she just let loose. Now, the beautiful thing about the ride is that we have centrifugal force, right? And centrifugal force says that where it starts, it will return, right? That's the way it works. And as we're on the ride, it landed, it went, and it kind of hovered, and it went right back around onto her, right? And all of a sudden, I don't know how long we were on this ride, but it seemed like the guy who was underpaid running the Gravitron must have took a lunch break, because we were on there, it seemed like for 15 minutes. And getting off of the Gravitron, I remember I looked over my friend Paul, and I was so excited because he looked sick, right? Because I was sick too, and I didn't want to be the only sick one. And he says, "Hey, can you go to the bathroom?" I said, "Sounds good." And we headed towards the porta potties, and both of us, we never even made it into the porta potties, and there our lunch laid on the side of it. I share that with you because I think the truth is it's a very good illustration of what life will look like if you try to rest the way man rests. Is you'll be nauseated. You'll to the point of almost spiritual sickness in many ways. It's because man doesn't really rest in his own right, but God calls us to rest in Him. If we try to rest in a religious way, we'll end up resting and spinning in circles. God desires us to rest so that we can see life for what it is, a blessing from Him. See, the disciples now, back to Mark 6, the disciples now have been sitting for a while with Jesus, because all of a sudden the passage says this, we pick it up in verse 35. It says, "By this time it was late in the day, so the disciples came to Him. This is a remote place," they said, "and it's already very late. Send the people away so that they can go to the surrounding countryside and villages and buy themselves something to eat." See, what you find when you rest is you come back with God from rest, and guess what? The crowd is still there, right? The task is still there that God has put before you. And they come back to Jesus, and all of a sudden, I envision them laying in their hammocks, right? They close their eyes and dozed off, and they open up, and the sun is kind of over in the side of the sky now because it's getting later in the day. And they look up on this hillside, and there's 5,000 men up there with their wives and children. And the task is still there, right? The heaviness and the weight is still there. And they say to Jesus, "Can you just tell them to go away?" In other words, let them know Casey's is around the corner, and they sell pizza 24/7. Like, they can catch it on their way home. It's going to be okay. And what Jesus says to them, and I think it's so key for us to understand, and to understand when we talk about rest, is that He says this in first part of verse 37. He says, you give them something to eat. Right? I don't know about you, but have you ever prayed the prayer of, "God, can someone else just take care of those people? Can someone else just take care of that individual?" I mean, there's 280 churches in Topeka. Why is it my responsibility? There's got at least one other Christian out there who cares about that person. Can they just take on that task? And usually the way God responds to that prayer is the same way Jesus responds to the disciples that day. He says, "You give them something to eat." Just because you go and rest, church, in God, do not believe it's a call to retirement. It's a call to go and rest and to come back and be aware that the crowd will still be there. The task will still be there. But you will be full with God, ready to give to those around you. You see, we see this is because all of a sudden now, we jump down in verse 42 in chapter 6. It says, "They ate and all were," what, church? Hear that word. Satisfied. They all ate and were satisfied. Now, we're not talking like jump on the treadmill, work out for Thanksgiving dinner, right? But they had food in their belly, but they were all satisfied. It's interesting that in that they all ate. I wonder if that included the disciples. Is that they ate and they were satisfied. There was a fish, and a couple fish and a couple loaves, and a little boy's He-Man lunchbox that feeds all these men and all these women. And it says that they were satisfied. When you rest and go back to the task that God has given you, the ministry that God has put before you, the family that He's called you to serve, you will help them and you will be satisfied. You see, we need to rest to see the movement of God. So we can feed elementary kids, so that you can serve the family across the street, so you can lead that Bible study, so you can lead a life group, so you can stay the course with God. Rest is needed. And that rest will only be found in Christ. So you continue in verse 42. It says, "And the disciples picked up 12 basketfuls of broken pieces of bread and fish. The number of men who had eaten was 5,000. People were satisfied, but there was more left over than when they began." And that only comes out of the love and the rest that God provides. See, the disciples thought to this point they had seen some big things, right? They had come to Jesus and said, hey, we've taught the truth. We've had these opportunities to share in the temple courts. There's even the lame guy that came and we were able to share with him and help him out. We helped the lady get food, whatever it was. And they experienced good things from God. They experienced good things of God. But up to this moment, they've never seen something like this. Is that Jesus took the small amount and made more left over after probably 11 to 12,000 people ate from a few amount of fish and loaves. You see, we see this is that when you rest, you will have the opportunity to see God in motion. Dallas Willard, author and teacher, says this in his book, The Great Omission, Reclaiming Jesus' Essential Teachings on Discipleship. He says, solitude, well practiced, will break the bower of busyness, haste, isolation, and loneliness. You'll see the world is not on your shoulders after all. You'll find yourself and God will find you in new ways. I've said it before and I think it's fair to say it again. Satan does not care whether you are alive or dead. Do you know that? He doesn't care. What he cares is, and his goal is for you to just be busy enough while you are alive to miss the whispers of God. That's what he cares. And if we do not rest, I want you to know you will not hear miss the whispers of God. You will miss the voice of God. You'll miss a strong voice from God. Because over this last month, I have to tell you, I spent 2 days with my wife alone in a cabin where it was quiet, right? Just me and her. I gotta say it was a little awkward, like reading, because it was quiet, right? Usually if you're in the basement of our house, you usually hear this dun 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 dun. Dun, 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 footsteps, then Mom! Right? That's what we hear. But it was quiet, right? We read some books, we watched a few movies, we hung out together, like it was good. You see, and also in this month, as I told you a few weeks ago, I spent nearly 40 hours this last month in the car with my kids, okay? I just want to tell you, it was enjoyable, it was good, and minus the proverbial question, are we there yet? Okay, like that, not yet. We're only on the tollway on 70, okay, where we're not to the East Coast, right? But I have to say, having an opportunity to rest, you get to hear them. You get to hear their thoughts, their stories, their